right, perfect. Alrighty, good morning. My name is Zachary McNatt, and I am the lead assessment developer here for AACN, work at Schroeder Measurement Technologies. So today we are going to look at the item development presentation, just to get a little overall of the do's and don'ts of item writing. And then once we're done with the presentation, we're going to look at the Test Development Center, just to give everybody an understanding of how to navigate and how to use the system for writing items. Okay, so let's get started. So the purpose of the examination. So our purpose of the examination is to enable qualified candidates to demonstrate competency while precluding unqualified candidates from achieving the distinction. So somebody might ask what that means exactly. So we want to create an examination where test-wise candidates do not have the potential ability of passing the exam by just simply being able to neglect certain options or just pick a I option just because it looks appealing. Versus we want to provide an examination that if a candidate is competent, they have an ability to pass if they follow the proper procedures through meeting the requirements and studying. So a couple security points that you'll want to keep in the back of your head while we're doing this campaign is you always want to make sure that your login and password information is secure. Just like any system, you don't want to provide any of your user ID or your password to access the bank. Change your password the first time you log in. You will be automatically required to do that when you first log in. You will be emailed your user ID, a temporary password, and the link to the Test Development Center. And the first time you log in with that temporary password, it will take you directly to the change password screen. When you are writing, please keep in mind to access the Test Development Center or the TDC from a secure location with a trusted connection. Basically, you want to access it with a Wi-Fi that has a password connected to it. Please don't go to like a Starbucks or like a Dunkin' Donuts or something similar where you can access the Wi-Fi without a password. Anytime you are writing, or more importantly, if you're writing in a public space, please make sure that you are keeping the screen secure. And more importantly, if you walk away from your computer at any time, please make sure you close out that browser when you leave your session. You don't want to leave up an item on the screen. Then that item potentially make it through completely past form development and somebody had seen that item and wrote it down by chance. The only reason we bring that up is we've actually had that happen before, so it's just something we try to keep in the back of everybody's minds. And of course, never discuss item or exam content with anyone outside of the SMT test development staff, which would be myself or anybody that you'll be working alongside from SMT. And of course, the SME Exam Development Committee, which is everybody that's on this call now or anybody else that is participating in the item writing campaign. So some terminology you will want to get yourself familiar with. An SME, or a subject matter expert, is an individual who exhibits the highest level of knowledge, skills, or ability related to a specific topic or practice. Again, that is each of you that is participating in this campaign. You are the subject matter experts. An item is the STEM and related options, which we will look at a display of the STEM and the item as a whole. The item is the portion of the STEM is the portion of the item that presents the stimulus to which the candidate must respond. Your options are the problem presented in the STEM, or A, B, C, and D. Your key is the one option that provides the correct response to the STEM, or your correct answer. And your distractors are the options that are incorrect. So just to give you a brief overview of how an item will look as a whole. So everything that you see on your screen right now is the item. And the top portion there, which is the question, is the STEM. And then you have your four options. And then the correct answer is your key. And then the other options are your distractors. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask real quick. Go ahead and unmute your microphone. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, going to go ahead and move on now. So a couple rules that you'll want to follow while you are writing is always please make sure to link your items to the detailed content outline. You will be provided that, and it will also be pre-populated in the Test Development Center. But the content outline is the document or the blueprint that has all the knowledge and abilities related to the examination. And you will need to spec each item somewhere along the content outline. Items must always be true to theory and practice. Of course, you don't want to add any false information, whether it is a distractor or your key. And items must be supported by a valid reference, any reference material that is approved by AACN. So two formats that we generally go by are a direct or a completion. The one on the left is a direct statement. The STEM is basically a question to answer with one of your 4 options. And then the one on the right, we have a completion format here, which is basically complete the sentence. It almost looks like a fill in the blank, but we do not use a fill in the blank, which we will look at the next few slides at some formats we prefer to not use. So like what we like to call them are the no good, the just bad, and the plain old ugly. So looking at the first one, the no good, fill in the blank. The reason why we do not try to use fill in the blank is we actually will find that candidates will try to find the best option that will fit the length of that blank space there. So instead of giving them that confusion, we just want to get straight to the point, and it's either best to make it a completion or a direct statement. Next is true or false. The reason why we try to avoid true or false is you're already giving a candidate a 50% chance of passing the item. So if you had an examination that had all true or false questions, and you have candidates that are coming and taking the exam, every single candidate statistically has a 50% chance of answering every single option correct or item. And last but not least, negatively stated items. This is not an all in case scenario. If you have to use an except question or not, sometimes we do have to do that. But if you can reverse it, it's for the best. If you can turn it into a positive stated, what's the best method or the most used or something along those lines instead of using a not or except. The reason behind that is if you have candidates going through the examination and they are asked to answer the correct option throughout the examination, and they come up across an item that is negatively stated, we have found that it takes candidates longer to format in their minds what's the incorrect answer versus the correct answer. So if you just give them an examination that's to the point, they're all asking the correct option, we're pretty much alleviating more stress from a candidate, and we're not trying to provide any more stress to any of the candidates taking the exam. Okay, so we'll stop right there really quick. Does anybody have any questions before we move through the presentation? Okay, so moving on. So your plan of attack while you are writing is to make sure that you focus on concepts that are relevant to competent practice. So again, just try to think of stuff that happens maybe in your day-to-day job, something that is crucial or important for somebody to be practicing safe as an AA or a CNL. You just don't want to provide any false information, or maybe it's something that is just basic knowledge, but it doesn't make a competent CNL. Make sure that you always aim towards practice-based items. Again, no false information. Items should be appropriate for the target candidate. Keep in mind the education experience levels. So again, the candidates come in, you got to think of what requirements needed to be met for them to be eligible to take the exam. We don't want to think of the best or somebody that's been a CNL for 20 years. You want to think of what would somebody entry level coming in, what would be important or crucial for somebody to be practicing safely to be a CNL. And of course, the concept of the item should be important and worth including in the exam. I kind of just spoke to that a little bit, but you have X amount of items in your exam is what you're writing worth taking that potential, that 1 point towards somebody becoming a CNL. So your strategy is to present a single problem. If you're writing your item and you notice that you're asking multiple questions, or you're asking the candidate to answer multiple thoughts on the item, you could probably split that up and make multiple items. You only want to give them just a single question or a single response. Be clear and concise. Just don't provide any over information. You don't want to teach them anything within the STEM. And we'll look at some of that in the next few slides. Providing the STEM all necessary information. Again, so you want to provide enough information to where you can get the thought process or what you're asking the candidate to answer across, but you don't want to provide a story, basically. Be free of style errors, teaching statements, and vague stems. That's what we'll look at in the next few slides again. And then remain free from creating potential biases. Use titles such as a manager, technician, the clinical nurse leader instead of somebody's name. Refrain from mentioning sex, age, religion, unless it's imperative to understanding the item content. And one of the ones I try to say is really important is do not use you when formulating the item. And the reason why we don't like to use you is if you write in the STEM, what would you do as a CNL, or something along the, if you're requesting what would they do, a candidate can actually come back and say, well, that's why I would do. Why is that wrong? You're asking, it leaves like an opinionated response. So we just want to put to the point, what should a clinical nurse leader, or what must a clinical nurse leader do? Something along those lines. So before we look at some of these style errors, does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, moving on. So the first style error here we're going to look at is a teaching statement. So just to read it really quickly, the pieces on a chessboard are the king, queen, bishop, knights, rooks, and pawns. And then you have the stimulus, which chess piece was originally called the elephant. Looking at this item, if you focus on everything that's red, that is a teaching statement. That is information that is not important to the item itself. It provides information that a candidate maybe didn't know and could use it on a future item within the examination. So if the secondary part, which is which chess piece was originally called the elephant, can stand alone as an item, you want to completely remove that teaching statement. So just to show it again, now you're asking the question to the point, which chess piece was originally called the elephant. You're not providing any additional information, and now you're asking it in a more competent manner where either they learned it, they studied it, somehow they know the information, versus giving them all that additional information that is just not needed in that specific item. So the next one is a vague stem. So for instance, right here, we have Leonardo da Vinci was. Well, what was he exactly? We might have a lot of things in our mind, or the first thing that will come to your mind is he's an artist, which is one of the options here. He is an artist, but we also have born in the United States, a vegetarian, and a twin. If you're familiar with Leonardo da Vinci, in this example, you might be able to remove two of them. But do we know if he was a vegetarian specifically? We don't. But if you also look, all of these options are completely different concepts. You have what? You have a hobby, you have where he was born, you have his eating preference, and then relatives, a number of relatives. Versus, if you change the stem to a more direct statement, so which of the following works of art? Now we're asking about a specific topic. We're asking about the art that was created by Leonardo da Vinci. Now we have 4 different works of art that have been created, and the question, or the stem, is asking which one was created by Leonardo da Vinci. So it's where you want to provide enough information to get your point across, but not too much where you might confuse the candidate. So your options, while you are formatting them, you'll want to attempt to make them as parallel as possible. That's like in length, words. Doesn't necessarily always have to equate to the exact same amount of words, but if you're able to keep them within a close enough length, that would be helpful, or help keep the item more competent or discriminate more positively. One clear and unique key. You don't want to provide keys that are partially correct or options that are partially correct and one more correct key. You just want to have the one correct key and 3 distractors that are completely incorrect. Avoid the use of always and or never. Distractors are real and plausible, and they're attractive but not tricky. So again, you don't want to provide any false information or any information that's just not true or realistic, but we're not trying to trick somebody by maybe spelling something slightly incorrect that's wrong, or something that is used for the question but just not for a CNL. Numeric options are ascending or descending order. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4 or 4, 3, 2, 1. It doesn't matter which order, just as long as they are ascending or descending. And do not use all of the above or none of the above, and do not combine options, which we will look at some of that in the next few slides. So before we look at some stuff like parallel options, subsets, and always correct keys, does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, moving on. So the first one we are going to look at is parallel options, which is using the same amount of detail throughout the item. So if you were to look at this item here on an examination, if you don't know any of this information or you've never studied this subject matter, you could probably assume that your key here is most likely going to be A. So in B, C, and D, we have either two thoughts or a single thought. So B is what? Item, author, and date written. C is last day used. And D is another two-thought process. Versus A, you have content sampling, item statistics, key distribution, cluing, and duplicative content. So again, you could probably assume with all the additional detail, it is most likely that going to be your correct answer, or your key. Subsets. So again, this is something else we try to avoid, where let's maybe assume that maybe the first or one of the other options are all correct, but there's a more correct option. So for instance, you have confirmed service, collect client demographic information, and gather client medical history. Where any of those three could be correct, your more correct option is conduct a client consultation, which would contain all of A, B, and C. So to correct an option like this one, you would probably want to change A, B, and C, since they are all contained within D delta. So a couple of review considerations is you'll want to make sure you review your items to remove style issues. And that is such as cluing, where a key term is in the stem and an option, and they relate back to each other to help pinpoint the key. Always correct keys. So something, just really quickly, if somebody fell off a building, what would you do? And the option would be like call 911. We know that would be the immediate correct response. To that point, I said, no obvious or humorous distractors, where it would be nice to have something funny in there, I'm sure, for our candidates to chuckle at. We're here to provide a competent examination. We're not trying to give somebody a quick laugh. I'm sure it would be nice, but we just want to make sure that somebody can practice safely. No excess information. Again, you would just want to be clear and concise, to the point. No slang or colloquial terms unless approved by AACN. And that goes for the same for the use of brand names. And then the bottom one, no incorrect spelling or grammar. We all do it. I don't expect everything to be 100% perfect. Just try to, I guess, clean it up the best you can. We do have an editor in-house who is really good, and she will probably catch 99% of everything that is missed. So just to look at a couple of these style issues, let's look at this next slide here, which is cluing. Key terms that are being repeated. So if you've never seen this movie, Big, the question is, what does Josh wish for in the movie Big? Or you have to win the lottery, be famous, never grow up, or to be big. So again, as a test-wise candidate, and maybe somebody that's never seen a movie, you could probably assume that the option is, well, he wants to be big if the movie's called Big, of these options. So instead, what you could do is you either remove Big from your stem or from your key, or you can add it to each option. So here we have it again, the same stem. Which movie, or what does Josh wish for in the movie Big? I have big league ball player, big shot Hollywood gasser, big brother to play with, or big enough to ride a carnival ride. If you've never seen the movie, you have no idea probably what the correct option is. So always correct keys. So a client sends a practitioner a friend request on the social networking site FriendFace. What should the practitioner do? So this is kind of a two-pointer here, where it's always correct keys or, subset. So we have accept, decline, or never acknowledge. Maybe any of those three could be the correct option. However, the first thing you should do as an employee, if maybe a client, requested that, is you should, of course, refer to the company policy. So if it's something that's just always obviously correct, we try to avoid that. So considering that multiple choice item format is being used to measure competency, a broad range of cognitive domains should be represented in the exam. And just to clarify that a little bit, is it's basically your knowledge, your skills, or your abilities. You can write your items into a more in-depth format, such as the basic level being knowledge, moving up through application, and then even to a more advanced slight level of critical thinking. Before we look at those, does anybody have any questions on anything we've covered so far? Okay, moving on. So the first one here we have is knowledge. Can the candidate recall previously learned information? And that is such as reciting a policy, define a theory, name a process, or recognize an object. So for lack of better words, it's more or less a basic level of writing. Can a candidate recall something that they've learned, that they've studied, something they were taught? To this point, which of the following animals is an amphibian? It doesn't require any additional thinking outside of, have they learned which of the following is an amphibian? A little bit more in depth, we have an application here. Question, can the candidate use knowledge to solve a problem such as calculating results, interpret a report, or respond to an event? So now they're provided with a scenario. When applying a wound prosthetic to an actor's arm, the actor begins wheezing and experiencing shortness of breath. What should the makeup artist do? So now they have to play the scenario slightly in their head, what's going on, and then applying some knowledge that they've learned, what would be their best action or course of action. And then last but not least to look at, we have critical thinking here. Can the candidate evaluate multiple components to arrive at the best solution? And that would be such as distinguishing between parts, make a diagnosis, select the most effective solution, and use logical deduction. So for instance, in ASA softball, a fly ball behind second base. The ball can be caught by the center field, second baseman, or shortstop. Which official makes the call? So now you have to analyze where the ball is going, where it's going to land, who's going to catch it, and then you also have to look at the final component is which official makes the call based on who is able to make that catch. I know it's not the subject matter, but it just gives just a more in-depth look at what a critical thinking item question would look like. Okay, so then of course consider the following criteria as you draft the items. Is the item relevant to competent practice? Is it accurate to theory and practice? Is it supported by current professional literature, research, or references which must be approved by AACN? Is it important and worth testing on the examination? Again, remember that there's X amount of items on an exam. I believe it's 100 for AACN. Does the item you're writing, is it competent? Is it test if they're practicing safely? And then, of course, is it appropriate for the target candidate, which is what are the minimum requirements for a candidate to be eligible to take the exam? So the answer to each of those questions should be yes. Okay, any questions that we have on the presentation before we look at the Test Development Center?
Zach, this is Jocelyn. I have a question about the references. Will you be providing us, or will AACN be providing us with an approved list?
Yes, I believe there's also the approved list Yeah, I believe I can get that from Chantel.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Any other questions? All righty. All right, so when we begin writing, you will receive an email, or two separate emails. You'll receive an email from myself, and then you will also receive that email from the Test Development Center, or the exact name for it will be tdcenter@smttest.com. When you receive that email, it will have your login, which is your user ID, and then you will have a temporary password, which is you'll enter here. That link will also have this location directly in the email, so you can just click on it and it should pull it straight up in your browser. So once you're here and you put in your user ID and your password, or your temporary password, you'll hit login, and it will bring you directly to this modify password screen. So you'll want to re-enter your temporary password and then put in a new password that only you know. Once you hit change password, it should bring you back to this main menu or the home screen, and it should say AACN OIW, or online item writing. If you do not see AACN OIW for any reason, you can contact me, and you'll have my email once I email everybody, just to make sure that you can contact me to make sure it's correct. I would hate for you to write in another bank and then we lose that information. So again, make sure that it says AACN OIW. If everything is correct here, you can go ahead and hit begin, and bring you to the main menu. And you'll want to click item development. So now you're at the item development menu screen. And then you'll want to hit create edit. Okay, so disregard this first item. So it should bring you here. It should bring you to a completely fresh item. So there's two ways to write your items here. You can either use edit item parts or edit whole. So let's take a look at the parts first. You just go ahead and click that button, and it will bring you to a screen that looks like such. So you'll want to make sure you write in the stems box or option A, B, C, D. If you try to write down here where it says preview, nothing will happen. Once you click on one of these writing boxes, you will see a toolbar populate. You can use this for any reason. If you need to bold something, if there's something that needs to be superscripted, or subscripted, if there's something that requires a symbol for any reason, maybe like a brand name, if there's something that's approved by AACN. So let's go ahead and write a quick item. What color is the sky? We got our four options. All right, so now we have our stem here, and we have our four options. You'll want to click refresh preview. If everything populates down here okay, you can go ahead and hit this return button. Now, one thing I like to show everybody, just in case, just because I've had people click this button and then wonder why I didn't tell them. So you might get upset if I tell you this, because you'll probably want to click it now, but do not click this X. If you click this X, you will lose everything that you wrote here. It's just a quick way to back out, but don't click it. Make sure you hit this return button. I can't stress that enough. If you're writing in this part screen and you make sure you hit refresh preview, if everything populates, hit return. And there it is. So now our item is here. One other thing that I try to tell everybody, you're probably going to hear me tell you this another 4 or 5 times throughout this recording, make sure you save. So there is a back-end timer that runs on this in this software. Once you open up one of these edit screens, it does not matter if you're typing along. If you're sitting here typing, it's not counting activity. It's counting length of time in a specific area. I think the timeout is about 15-ish minutes. I usually tell everybody to check it every 10 to 12 minutes. A good habit I've gotten into is if I'm spending a lot of time writing and I hit that refresh preview button, you can either try to copy it here, just copy that information, and then when you return, if it logs you out, you at least have it on your clipboard copied. So again, when you're writing and you think you're spending more than 10, 12 minutes, just go ahead and hit that return button and hit save. You should get a nice record updated, and you know it's going to restart. So just to show you what the other one looks like, we have edit item whole. So this one, again, it's going to look similar to how it is on the examination. There's a couple of separators here, but more or less, this is how it's going to look on the exam. Same thing when you start clicking on one of these fields, you'll get a toolbar. You can type away in here. It's not going to hurt anything. But again, 10, 12 minutes, timer starts. There's no refresh preview because this basically is the preview. So you can just hit this return button. Habit, again, I like to get into. It's something you'll see me doing during review. It's just copy or highlight it and copy it and click return, just in case it logs you out. That way you have the information that you wrote still on hand. And then, of course, save. So now we have our stem written, and we have our options. So now we have to define for the system which one is the key. Whereas we might know which one it is, we still need to tell the system, hey, you need to know which one's correct. So you come up to this location here, where it says key, and you pick your option. So in this instance, we know it's D delta. Okay, so then next we would need to make sure that we have a valid reference. So if you click this REF button on the right side, there's a pre-populated list where it says references. I believe this is all the approved material. There might be more. I'll need to coordinate with Chantal just to make sure. But if for any reason you need to add in additional information, so let's say it was this one right here, just picking one randomly, right? And let's say this one did have a page number. You can click on here and type, so let's say it was page 42. All right, so now we know that it's from the National Voluntary Consensus Standards for Patient Outcomes, and it's on page 42. Okay, so you're happy you found a valid reference. You're happy with your stem and options. You have a key. Next, you need to define the domain. So you want to come down here. It says Series 2. Oh, I'm sorry, we moved it up. Come up here to the very top where it says Content Domains. And on Series, we need to pick which one it would be. So let's say, for instance, this is Nursing Leadership. And for each level on the detailed content outline to populate, you need to pick the top level. So for instance, you can't see level 3 here. I'm clicking on it, nothing's coming up. Okay, so we know it's Nursing Leadership, and then let's say it's Patient Assessment. And now more information populates for level 3. Now let's say it's performed an advanced assessment of microsystems across the care continuum. And there's nothing else. That means that was the end of that location on the detailed content outline. And just to remind you, you will receive a document that has the full detailed content outline listed, as well as, of course, it being pre-populated here. But that way you can just kind of look back and forth and you don't have to guess where each location is. Each of you will receive item writing assignments which are related to the blueprint or the detailed content outline. So you'll know where you're writing. So if you hear one of, like for instance for me, I'll say, yeah, you're assigned 1E2. You know that that's 1 for the top level, E, and then 2. Okay, Does anybody have any questions at this point, just before I go over the final parts of the Test Development Center? I am going to take silence as everybody understands. All right. So just a final couple things. When you're happy with the item you wrote, you have your key designated. You have a valid reference material. And you have defined where this item would be spec'd on the detailed content outline. You can go ahead and come up to the status and change it from draft to ready for review. And then hit save. When you change your items to ready for review, you can see it after you save, but once you navigate away from this item, which is in this instance 625, you will not be able to see it anymore. If you come across some information that you found out better validated your item or discredit it, for instance, maybe you found a reference that said what you wrote wasn't correct, but you can't get back to it because it's in ready for review, you can always just contact me via email or call me and say, hey, I think it was this item number, or I only remember these 2 or 3 words from the item. Can you please look it up for me? I most likely will be able to find the item you are referring to send it back to you in draft status so you can see it. So you're completely done with your item now. Next steps is to work on a new item, for instance. So after you saved it, directly to the right of that is Add New. You want to go ahead and click that button. It'll prompt you, do you want to add a new item? You hit OK. And it brings you to a brand new item. It has a unique item number up here. Now it's 626. If you're working on a couple different items, you can of course use these buttons here, which is first, last, previous, or next. Self-explained, first will bring you to your first item that you're working on, last will bring you to your last item, and then previous and next will take you to one previous item in reference to the item numbers or the next item. But let's say you're working on a lot of items. Let's say you have 10, 12 items you're working on. You don't want to sit here and keep hitting next, 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 next. You can write down your item numbers and maybe put a description of what you're working on. But let's say I was on like item number, I don't know, 650, and I wanted to go back to 625. So you can hit this Go To button. Should pull this up here where it says Item Bank Ref. You can disregard client ID, that's for internal use. But just type in your item number, so 625. And it should bring you right back to the item if it's in draft status. The reason why I was able to see it is just because I have admin abilities. But yes, if it's in draft status, you should be able to get back to any item number that you are working on. And I think that is it for the writing location. So again, any other questions here before I show you the last component, which is just the search function? Okay. So just 2 important things. If you need to go back for any reason, if you need to back up to go to the search function, or if you're in the main menu, you always want to use this back button here. This is programmed directly into the software. So this is how you will navigate backwards in the program. If you hit the back button up here, you may receive an error message, or it might say you don't have admin rights. It'll give you something funky. Just to show you, let's see if it'll do it. It's kind of working a little bit, but sometimes it'll get a little screwy. Yeah, so see how it's saying now I have to save. Right, now I'm getting the error message. So don't try to press this button up here. It'll just cause a headache and it'll mess with you when you least expect it. So see, it brought me back here, but now it's going to screw up. So one other thing to show you, if you accidentally do that, and even if you're able to make it back here, don't assume that everything's okay, even though you made it back to the screen. So again, if you're pressing one of these buttons, another good thing to do, and if you ever leave your session or if you're done for the day, is don't just click this X up here. don't use the browser, again, hit the logout button on right directly programmed into the system. So it'll bring you straight back to the home screen, and you can sign right back in as if you normally would, and now we know there's no problems. So just to show you again, you log in, OIW, you hit begin, you're on the main menu, click item development, and then you're at your item development screen. So if you're going to, of course, write, again, you go to create edit. But now that we're here at the item development menu, I'm going to show you the other function, which is the search function. So it's going to bring up something that looks like this. And let's say you're looking for one of your items, right? So you can look by item text. If you want to look for what you're working on in draft. If you know what domain you're possibly writing to, you can look it up in here. And you can disregard everything but under. You'll only be able to see your own items, so this doesn't matter. But let's say we're not sure what item number we have, and we only know a couple minimal information about it. Well, I remember I was talking about the sky, so I'm going to put in sky. And then you hit this click to start search. And it's going to look for every item in the bank that has the word sky in it, which in this case is the one I was working on. So if you put in, maybe you're working on something directly regarding to the CNL. Now, for instance, I have this many items, but it would be anything you wrote. Just an intro. So you know you're working on some IV questions maybe. There's many, many ways to look for it. I mean, it's pretty good at detecting items. And yeah, you just hit this review button, and it'll pull you straight to your item. So let's just go to sky one more time. There's sky, review, and now I'm right back to the writing screen again. Okay. So that is the item development presentation, as well as a walk through the Test Development Center on how to utilize and how to navigate. Are there any final questions or any remarks that would be helpful for somebody that was unable to make it to this call?
Real quickly, Zach, this is Chantal. Just wanted to inform the group that we, myself, Zach, will get together and we can provide you with the exam content outline and also the list of current references in order to use while you're working on the items as noted earlier in the presentation.
Perfect.
Chantel, oh, I'm sorry, Zach, this is Jocelyn. Is there a way to get electronic access if we don't have the references, or how in our, I don't even know if our school library has all of them. How do we manage gaining access into the AACN approved references?
If any of you need electronic access, let me know and we can provide that information online through an account set up.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? No question is a bad question.
Hi, this is Chris. I've got a question. When we receive our item writing assignment, do we also receive a deadline for the draft to submit for review?
That's a very good question. Absolutely. So what will happen is within the next week, I need to double check our timeline, but I believe it's within the next week or two, I will be creating the item writing assignments for everybody. And then you'll receive an email with those assignments. You should have the detailed content outline, a couple other things, just where we're asking you to write. But yeah, there'll be a date and time saying, hey, this is when we're starting. This is when we would like for you to meet your deadline. And then we'll start the review process at that point.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any additional questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Angela calling. What happens after we submit it to review? Do we get feedback, or what can we expect after that?
So what will happen is when your item goes ready for review and we review it on a call, a couple things can happen. One, everything works out great. We review it. maybe there's some minor tweaking to it and it gets accepted. There will be nothing further required from you at that point for that item. If the item is reviewed and let's say they like the concept, the review committee or whoever is reviewing, we will send it back to you with some comments here on the screen. They'll be populated here and you'll see what everybody was thinking, maybe what they wanted to see changed. So maybe you'll see something like this item. The distractors weren't very attractive, or it's too easy of an item. They might give some more concept points to it, just something that could help you further write the item. And if that does happen, it will be sent back to you in needs modification. And I'll usually send out an email about halfway through the review process when we're through half of the review webinar saying, if you have any items sent back to you in needs modification, please go back and review and edit them by the last webinar, which I will have a date for you at that time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any additional questions? Okay, well, I greatly thank everybody for taking the time out of their day today to watch this recording. Just to give a final remark, this recording will be uploaded online to a secure location, and you each will be provided the link with the assignments are distributed. And then I will try to get it out to everybody, hopefully by the end of today, as a single email, just for if anybody wants to watch the training prior to the official distribution of the assignments. I hope each of you have a great day, and I look forward to working with each of you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.